Welcome back to Star History Blitz. My name is Mrs. B. Gonzalez, and we are pushing forward with the Industrial Revolution Part 2. Here are some of the key points that we'll be reviewing for today. As we continue with the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't just innovations that contributed to the mass production of goods. There was also innovations that were part of communication and transportation. So let's talk about the telegraph. Samuel Morse contributed to the U.S. growth and development by enabling instantaneous long-distance transmission of information. So we didn't have telephones back then or any kind of social media to inform the nation, but what we did have was Samuel Morse's telegraph. And what it did was a series of electrical impulses that he created a code for. So every dot and dash that you would do on one end, someone else on the other end will hear it, and they knew that was a code that represented letters, that made words, and so that's how they were communicating. And that was a major method of long distance communication. And so this was because of Samuel Morse and the telegraph. Now, between 1892 and 1854, more than 12 million immigrants passed through what is known as Ellis Island in order to try and start a new life in the United States. They came for many different reasons. Some came to escape religious persecution, others political oppression, poverty in their countries. Some of the main immigrants that came are the Irish, the Chinese, Germans, and Swedes. Now, Ellis Island is over here. So you're talking about Irish, Germans, and Swedes were the ones who came onto through this port city, while the Chinese came through San Francisco because if you keep moving west, you have the continent of Asia. And so these are some of the main immigrants that came over because of the effects that the Industrial Revolution had. I want you to just take a second to look at this quick video. The darker the color in that territory, the more the population density, meaning there's more people there. So I want you to see the pattern. Where does it start? Where does it then begin to spread to? Other parts of the Industrial Revolution include a transportation revolution. Robert Fulton is the inventor of the steamboat. He took the steam power, put it on a boat, and created the steamboat. And these boats would go up and down the Mississippi River, transporting goods and people. This made things faster, cheaper, easier. We could do more of it, and it was better. Now, what do we mean by cheaper? Well, it's cheaper to ship goods, right? And it's also cheaper for the ticket to go and travel. The tourism industry really started to gain momentum. What this means is people could now travel because they could afford it, because it was cheaper to travel, because they could get on a steamboat and now go across the United States, up and down the Mississippi River. So the price of shipping goods went down. The cost of traveling went down. Could they do more of it? Yes. So it's important to know that increase-decrease relationship there. It's cheaper to ship and to travel, so we can do more of it. So the cost of fares went down. The cost of traveling is cheaper. Another form of transportation that happened was the Erie Canal. One of the things is the Midwest farmers over here. This over here is considered the Midwest. These Midwest farmers had all their products and their produce that they were trying to get to the East Coast to sell in those port cities, like in New York City over here. The problem is, if you remember, we've got the Appalachian Mountains here, and it's really difficult to transport your goods across those mountains. It's a lot easier to transport on water. So what they did is they started to create a series of canals. One of the most important ones was the Erie Canal, which was 360 miles long, that connected Lake Erie to the Hudson River in New York. Notice the Hudson River here hits New York City. So now these Midwest farmers could take some of these rivers, then go through the Lake Erie, and then get the Erie Canal, get down on the Hudson River, and end up at New York City. And New York City becomes one of the vital commercial centers and one of the country's busiest seaports because of this. So make sure that you know that. Now, another important thing is the main people who were constructing the Erie Canal were Irish immigrants. They were the main ones building the Erie Canal. Another form of transportation that was revolutionized was also the railroad, because we had a new process for steel making, which was the Bessemer steel process. This allowed us to make steel faster, easier, better, more efficiently. And so now we can make those train tracks a lot faster. So we started to create railroads that crisscross America, like the Transcontinental Railroad that went from New York City to San Francisco. And so these railroads took a lot of labor to create. They had to blast through mountains because it wasn't an easy straight shot. There were mountains in the way. They had to blast through mountains. They had to build bridges over rivers. If there was a hill, they had to level it. If there was a hollow, they had to fill it. And so the main labor force that was building these railroads were Chinese and Irish immigrants. The Chinese built the western part of the Transcontinental Railroad because that's where they were coming in through, the west, right? While the Irish immigrants built the eastern part because that's where they were coming through Ellis Island. And so together they ended up meeting and they built the Transcontinental Railroad. So again, just to show you some visuals on Chinese immigrants, first, they came, right? And this is them mining for gold. This is that panning system where they were looking for gold because the sediments, the gold, the minerals would be heavier and end up on the riverbeds. But if they didn't find gold, they would start working in building the Transcontinental Railroad. So here you see the western, the image that represents the Chinese immigrants, and the eastern section that represents the Irish immigrants. And so here the Irish immigrants were building the Erie Canal. It was all man-made, right? And they didn't have machines like we have today. Keep in mind that these immigrants that came in who were working for practically nothing, getting paid almost nothing, were getting discriminated by Americans because Americans felt that they were coming in and stealing their jobs. And so when they were discriminated, this word is called nativism. Americans were discriminating these immigrants. They would mistreat them because they believed that they were stealing their jobs from native-born citizens. Native-born mean Americans who were born there in the United States versus foreign-born, which are people coming in from other countries. There was even a party known as the Know Nothing Party, which was an anti-immigrant political party that blamed immigrants such as the Irish and the Chinese for taking jobs away. So this was known as nativism, being discriminated because you were an immigrant. There was also German immigrants who came and settled all along the Midwest area right here. And they came and they built small farms and they had livestock, which is like pigs and chickens and horses and stuff. They brought over a lot of traditions like kindergarten and polka music and the Grimm brothers fairy tales and sausage making. All of these things were things that they brought over from their culture that our culture now has, such as the Hispanic Mexican culture uses the accordion. Well, it was brought over by German immigrants. Again, the Irish immigrants came and settled all along the East Coast. And what pushed them to leave Ireland? The potato famine. One of their main crops was potato. Just like Jamestown, their main crop was tobacco, and later, the South was cotton was king. Well, in Ireland, it was potatoes, and there was this disease that spread all along the soil, and they couldn't grow their potatoes anymore. So there was a famine, meaning people were starving to death. More than 2 million people left Ireland and came to the United States to start a new life because of the potato famine in Ireland. The economic boom brought about the California gold rush caused many Chinese immigrants to settle in California and create those distinct communities such as Chinatown. Many of them ended up working in the gold fields, didn't find gold, so they constructed the western section of the Transcontinental Railroad, and a lot of them faced nativism. There was also Swedes from Sweden. These Swedes who came over settled in the Midwest, specifically in Iowa. They came in search of fertile farmland, so they had small farms with livestock as well. So that concludes part 2 of the Industrial Revolution. So remember, it wasn't just innovations as far as inventions that made producing goods faster, cheaper, easier, more efficient. It was also communication revolution, transportation revolution. And what are some of those effects? It brought in workers, it brought in immigrants, nativism, it made communication faster and transportation faster. So that concludes the Industrial Revolution. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Mrs. B. Gonzalez, and I hope to see you in the next STAAR History Blitz that has to do with the Age of Reform.